Alright, I want to preface this video by first saying that, number one, sorry for taking a while. Plus, number two, if you haven't seen my first part, you should probably see that first, and then come back here. Alright? I know I'm a nervous wreck, but still, probably should watch that video first. So this is, gonna be a three-part series. So, probably should see the first part before you see the second. Before I do get started, I do want to say I did not have that much fun reading this part. I'm gonna be honest. Okay, I'll get into that a little bit later. But this is by far the low point of the book, in my opinion. So we left off where this mysterious woman was following Winston, and he thought that this was an agent. As it turns out, she is in fact not an agent, but she is actually a woman who despises the government and gave Winston a note saying that I love you. Out of nowhere. I mean, stalking your lover, that is a thing. That's a thing. Um, and then they get together, and that's essentially the first three chapters of this part. Now, the only thing that these two, like, I see chemistry have together is that they both hate the government. Now, that's great in putting your message into saying that totalitarian governments are bad, because then they give you more reasons as to why. But if you're trying to make a believable and likable relationship that you think is going to work out, it's not going to be Julia and Winston's relationship. Although I'm not personally a romance guy. I'm not going to be reading romance novels, probably not on this channel ever. It just doesn't seem like my thing. I apologize if anybody somehow wanted to see that. That's not me. But yeah, I don't see the chemistry with these two characters. But what they do discuss is how humanity seems to be decreasing in essentially value, while nature has remained as valuable throughout time. So, and how we see that once they make love for the first time, or sex, we see how they're kind of surrounded by birds, and how the birds represent how much they want to be free. So that goes for the next three chapters, and then they rent this little room in that antique shop that Winston went in part one. And they rent it, and they talk about how the party controls the people, and how Julia believes that in part one there were a bunch of rockets and bombs in the cities, and how she believes that this is probably the party itself and not outside agitators, which I have to agree with. Because especially during this time, because the book was made in 1949. Now, in 1940, during World War II, the Germans did the Blitz campaign, which was a series of bombings on Great Britain. It was originally for the military, but then one German bomber decided to bomb London, thinking it was a big military target. So then the British decided to bomb back Berlin, and Hitler got very mad, so he ordered all of his planes to start attacking civilian targets. And the Blitz did not work out for the Nazis, and it instead increased British morale and support for the war, so that the British could defeat the Germans. So with that context, yeah, I could definitely see where Julia is coming from and saying that no, this is just to give up more war hysteria for the common person and for the party and against outside agitators. And they live in this room now. Essentially, we're in this room for the most part. We're renting the room, and there are a bunch of rats. You know, because it's part of the proles area, as they call it, or the 85%, and it's not where the party is, since the party leaves the proles alone. But I mean, since they don't really try and help the area all too much, there's a bunch of horrible conditions, just as the beginning of the book kind of stated, and how there are a bunch of bugs, rats, etc. Think of the slums, or slums in general. And Winston is ungodly terrified of rats specifically. I don't know why. I mean, rats is a city person's best friend, so I mean, I don't know. I think Winston should just be better, honestly. But if you don't know, this is called foreshadowing. I'll probably talk about it in that part if it brings up. Probably will. Then we meet O'Brien again. I didn't talk about him in the first part all too much, if I did at all. But O'Brien is this character who he's very mysterious, but Winston believes that he is a central part in wanting to defeat the party. It's just a feeling, and he meets with them personally. And he says how the guy from the first part who was talking about language and so enthusiastic about it, and how the dumbing down of language is actually a good thing, and how Winston thought that he was too smart and that the party would eventually kill him. Winston was absolutely correct in that assumption. And O'Brien tells him that he's been vaporized. So they meet up, and O'Brien gives Winston his head that he is against the party, and that if he truly believes in this revolution against the party, then he should meet him at his place eventually. And so he does. And this is and they meet, and essentially O'Brien mates Winston, and Winston brings in Julia as well. And they make him swear a bunch of promises. How things like how they could sell out their own country, even if it's from outside agitators. Essentially, that anything is better than the party, even if it is immoral. And so he agrees to it. And then he says he's going to bring a book specifically to O'Brien. I mean, not to O'Brien, to Winston, and say how, and share the Brotherhood's ideas. They call themselves the Brotherhood. They're revolutionaries. And so he does, and this is the most boring part of the chapter. And it is essentially like 2 to 3 chapters of just political point after political point after political point after political point. And the Brotherhood is meant to represent truth. I mean, that's all Winston is. He doesn't try and go with morals. He's just, the party is lies, atop of lies, atop of lies, and that he believes that there must be a truth. That's why some people like Winston, because he, not people in the book, but people like in real life, like Winston, because he just represents the truth. He believes that there is a truth, and that he believes that it can be found and given to the public. And this book that he brings, I won't talk about the political points. I was originally going to, but it would give you a headache. Listen, I like reading about politics, and it gave me a headache. It is political point after political point after political point after political point, and it does not stop for 2 whole chapters. So it really does, especially since me personally, if I remember correctly, I agreed with like 50% of it. So, it's really hard to say like, yes, the party that believes truth the revolutionaries that only believe truth and that only want to fight for the truth, and yet only 50% of this I agree with. It brings into question um, essentially the brotherhood, because I mean, if O'Brien wants you to say that you would even sell out your own country, and that it's fine to be immoral, and that he gives you a book that where only people like me, only 50% agree with, it's very suspicious for a guy who is supposed to be all about truth, but gives a book to people like me who essentially just want the truth to come out and want the party to be destroyed. Only 50% agree. And I think the book was to annoy you slightly. I had a conversation with a person about it, and the person and I agreed, that she and I hated this part of the book. But then you get to the final chapter where Winston is reading about it, and that inside the walls was a telescreen, and that now Julia and Winston are arrested by the thought police. And that's when it clicks for you that they were probably sold out, either by the Brotherhood, or the Brotherhood doesn't exist at all, or that the Brotherhood does exist, but O'Brien is not a part of the Brotherhood. And it seems like the book was a fraud. Because if it was all about truth, then I feel like everybody should be on board with it. But if people like me were only 50% aboard with it, causing to question the truthfulness of said book. So yeah, that's the end of part 2. I know this is probably very short video, but I typically don't like to talk about things that I didn't like reading. This is by far a low point in the book. I mean, Julia's okay as a character. O'Brien's much more interesting than he was in the first part, since I actually mentioned his name. And Winston's kind of the same. Like how I mentioned how Winston is actually unlikable, but then he's starting to get more likable again. It's like he's not likable yet, if he gets likable in the third part. But he's still at that middle ground where, to me, where he's like, he's not all that likable, but I could give him a chance, and despite the fact that Winston's in like a no, like it seems like Winston is going to lose no matter what, he still fights for what he believes is the truth, which I can commend. It's just when you say that how everybody is dumber than you and how you're better than everybody else, you're not very likable. But yeah, the third part's gonna be really interesting then, because I don't see how Winston gets out of this. He's caught by the thought police, and considering the fact that 1984 is the most popular dystopian novel I can think of, I mean, other than maybe The Hunger Games, that's typically for younger people like me. Then yeah, I don't see a way out of this. And also, if you saw my Animal Farm video, how we talked about that book, and how that didn't end well for the average animal and only ended well for the pigs. If you draw the parallels of the ending of that book, I have a feeling it's gonna end horribly for Winston as well. But yeah, I'm sorry to be such a downer. I mean, it's just I didn't like the part personally. I'll get the third part out soon. But if you like the video, please give out a like. I would hopefully you guys subscribe. If you guys aren't, I gotta do the YouTuber thing. Okay, give me some, please. Please give me the $1 bill at maximum, please. Okay, but yeah, you guys have a good one. Bye.